Brian Souza, hi. How are you?
Very good.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for joining me. Like you were just saying, you've come to your studio this morning, and that's good that you've got it away from home. That must be helpful, keep your work separated.
I mean, it's grass is always greener scenario where you kind of think, oh, I wish I had it in the house. It was, close proximity to where you live and just, be much easier. But also, yeah, it's good to have separation and have a place where you do some work separate from your home.
Yeah. Well, I'm really, happy that you're able to make it today. We've been chatting for a while to try to get the times aligned. I'm really fascinated to learn about Swell, your new venture that has been. How long have you been running Swell now?
Just over a year officially, but I guess it was probably 3 years in the overall in the sort of planning and then launch phase.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk about the Swell, and I know that you've also wear various other hats in the music industry, and sort of talking about how you and sharing a little bit about how you navigate wearing all those various hats, and because I think that would be really useful, especially today. I think while people are trying to sort of rebuild and find new ways of making an income in the music industry. You've worn various hats for a long time, and so I'd love to learn a bit about your, your journey with that, and what were the reasons of sort of having that business as well as being a creative producer and artist, and rather than sort of just going in and relying on just being an artist. And having, I guess, another business. And so, first of all, let's talk about Swell, because I find that obviously more than ever, people are leaning more towards health and well-being and finding ways to, because the music industry's changed rapidly, like a lot of other things, and we're living in a whole new world, and health and well-being is such a prominent thing today. And I personally find it more so important for today, in not only just for everyone's life, but for the music entrepreneur and the creative. I think it's essential. So yes, tell us a bit about Swell.
Yeah, so Swell, it's kind of shorthand for sound and wellness, or sound and well-being. And it's really an exploration into a field that I've been interested in for a long time. I've always been a music fan, since my teens, and always been surrounded by music, and really, as you've said, engaged with music in lots of different ways. But really, what has been kind of like one of the key kind of like consistent drivers for me is just to really unpick and get sort of a deeper understanding of why music affects me and all of us, I think, in such a deep and rich and nourishing way. And so, from going in my teenage years as just a music fan, consuming music and really just exploring, different cultures through music, and, really kind of creating my own identity as a teenager around music, away from the kind of mainstream and things, and kind of like making my way in the world, understanding different, things, different things work in the culture space, through music. I mean, this is how I've latterly come to understand it. Didn't really get that at the time, but it was just something that really, for a lot of us, I guess, working in music now, that's probably the entry point. But, when I then went to university, I studied psychology, and everything in my psychology degree, which I was allowed to do around music, I did. So I started to explore how music affects brain and body in multiple different ways, what it's doing to our conscious as well as our subconscious. And that was what really kind of like opened up this whole world of research that was going on, which is fairly kind of new in the kind of grand scheme of things. And that was another reason why I made it exciting. It was like a lot of stuff that was novel and just being discovered in terms of like the impacts of music, so lots of stuff that we kind of intrinsically know and probably have done since for centuries, back to the ancient Greeks and even before that, music has existed, from the dawn of time. But really that kind of empirical, kind of evidence-based research was just kind of like coming into some fruition from the 80s onwards. And it was something I really wanted to explore. And I did that. And a few different sort of takeaways was just like the impacts of music in terms of how it affects our behavior. On one side, like music from a kind of more commercial standpoint, if we're in a shop or in a restaurant, music's playing, it's background music, how does that affect our behavior, and lots of different things around that in terms of the amount of money we spend, the length of time we spend in the space, our rate of, how quickly we chew, if we're eating with the music on the background and things like that. So that was like really interesting. But, sideline to that was this whole kind of field around music and health and how that's, your music is affecting our emotions, our mood, and triggering different behaviors within us. And I guess Swell, just to fast forward, 15, 20 odd years, was, my step back into that. So just before the pandemic, I studied and trained as a sound therapist with the British Academy of Sound Therapy. And really that was a great way for me to just kind of unpack kind of like the music paradigm. I've been a music producer, I understand how music works, I understand how to combine like different frequencies of sound, to make songs essentially. But sound therapy really takes that sort of principles of frequency and places that into this whole kind of like world of like, I guess science where frequencies of sounds can be used to manipulate different brain and body responses in ways that can be pleasant, that can be nourishing, that can be beneficial to our mental health and our well-being and stuff. And those kind of principles that I kind of took away, and the methodology that I was taught, in terms of how a sound therapist would work with these frequencies using healing instruments and different frequencies of sound, was really fascinating to me. And that was something that really was one of the underlying pillars of what Swell then became. The other pillar that Swell is based on is this idea of the power of just listening, listening to nature in particular. So we're surrounded by, most of us, certainly myself, I'm based in London, surrounded by noise all the time. And also, just in the world that we live, like the attention economy, we're being pushed and pulled in lots of different directions to grab our attention. So this whole kind of essence of just purely listening attentively, listening in the moment, mindful listening, when it comes to listening to the sounds of the natural environment or even just a piece of music, is something that I started to think about quite a lot and realize that actually that might be getting lost, in the milieu of different things that are trying to grab our attention on a day-to-day. So I get a lot of inspiration from Pauline Oliveros with her deep listening kind of practices, dating back to the 70s and 80s and stuff. And part of what Swell is to try and place that principle of just listening in the moment to the sounds of nature, to the sounds that we're working on creating, using sound therapy techniques and music techniques, and pulling those three different disciplines together. If you're thinking about sound therapy, you're thinking about music production, and you're thinking about biophilia or nature listening into one pot that can help, that can be brought together to then help the listener in various different ways.
And what technology are you using at the moment for one to practice or go through an experience with these sounds?
It's an interesting field because there's lots of novel pieces of technology that exist or are just coming into being that I think could be really effective in this whole space. So, and one of the challenges I think for Swell and one of our initial experiments was we just wanted to, I guess one of the starting points was we recorded a sound bath, if you know what that is. It's essentially
Yes.
a sound therapy session, 45 minutes, potentially using gongs or Himalayan singing bowls or these kind of traditional healing instruments, inverted commas. And a sound therapist would play these instruments in different ways to affect you, and you'd be lying on a yoga mat and you'd be, listening to those sounds. And I found that kind of experience very deep and enriching experience and quite transformational, actually. I could get myself into a very different kind of headspace, an altered state of consciousness, which is an interesting space to be. It certainly is a relaxation experience for sure. So one of the first things we did was to try and purely record that and then deliver that digitally, through just a headphone listening experience on a mobile phone app. And we tested that with a number of different listeners, and we got a really mixed bag of results. And what our takeaway from that was actually, when you lose the therapist in the room, the held space, the whole setting, the ability for the listener to see the instruments as well as kind of experience them, through their body and through their ears, you miss a large part of what that actual experience is. So we kind of went back to the drawing board, and that's when we started to kind of look at, well, hang on a minute, how would a headphone experience work through, an app or something? It isn't a replication. It can't be a replication directly of a sound bath or a gong bath. It needs to be different and potentially more than that. So that's where we started to go, well, let's bring in musical elements, let's bring in the sounds of nature and things. So that was again, one of the starting points. And then we started to look at well, what types of technology would then help to deliver this? So we worked with a university in London, the University of Arts, or twin with Goldsmiths University, and they have a lab set up there called Mimic, which is specifically involved with AI technology and music, so machine learning and music. And we commissioned them over the last part of last year to build for us a program, a sort of generative AI type model to help us essentially take the compositional framework that the sound therapist might use and implant it into a set of rules that then can ingest samples, and that could be these healing instruments, but it could be other musical elements, it could be the sounds of nature, and create a digital sound bath or therapeutic sound, what we call a sound treatment, that can be adaptive to the listener. So the listener can potentially change things like the duration of time that they might want to listen to, because obviously everyone is time poor. Do they have 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Do they have an hour? This is the kind of thing. If we can make that experience elastic and personalized to that listener, then it becomes a lot more accessible. And then adjusting different parameters within that, such as the intensity and, such as the flow, the arc of experience. And by doing that, we can hope to achieve different kind of results, and that could be, for the principle of relaxation, but it could also be something we're experimenting with right now in hotel bedrooms, which is a sleep session. It could be for, creative kind of inspiration, which is the big part of my specific interest. And another part is just this whole idea of nature connectedness, so the kind of connected to nature through natural sounds, but through a kind of spatial kind of headphone listening experience. So that was one thing. We were looking at AI technology, and that is still an ongoing process. So we haven't actually launched this yet. We're testing at the moment, getting good results. Towards the end of this year, hopefully this will be something that we'll start to introduce into different spaces. Looking at the B2B, business to business kind of world first. We're talking to hotels and spas, etc., but also kind of psychedelic centers as well that are kind of coming up. I know it was in Australia. That's a big thing for you guys at the moment. So that's one side of it. And then the other side is looking at...
And huge in Los Angeles too. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that it's another strand of what Swell has ended up sort of being involved with. So to speak quickly on that, I was commissioned by Imperial College, who are one of the leaders in the field, to curate a set of playlists essentially for their silo pain study, which is a study into chronic pain using psilocybin. So sufferers of chronic pain, which is fibromyalgia, they go into Imperial College, they're given a pretty big dose of psilocybin, psychedelic, they're in a room for up to 10 hours, blindfolded, headphones on, and they're essentially listening to music for that whole duration of time whilst experiencing what they experienced through the drug. And it was a really interesting project to try and put together a series of playlists that would fit that experience, would fit that type of demographic of person that was experiencing it, and also just fit the kind of the narrative arc of the the drug essentially. And that was another way in which, you know, this whole kind of idea of like what music can be when, you know, exported into this world of health and science and research. I think it's massive potential, and it's really interesting, and it's really integral as well. I mean, all the psychedelic centers that I've talked to, you know, music is an omnipresent, you know, it's there. And there perhaps hasn't been like so much. I mean, there is some like research into like, okay, so what type of music and how does that get delivered, and like how does that then affect the listeners in a different way? How does that affect as a variable the delivery of that drug and the efficacy of that drug, etc. and stuff. So that's another sort of interesting strand of what Swell does. And then the third thing I was going to talk about was this use of what we have, kind of more like haptic or vibroacoustic kind of technology, essentially either from like wearables. So, you know, the likes of Subpack, I've got a bass units that you wear, so you're feeling the sound. But we've worked with a number of different vibroacoustic chair companies. So essentially you're getting a sonic massage, where they, you know, there's a relaxation chair, a lounger, and you have speakers in the chair simply, and you've got headphones on, and where we've got this set up in the hotel spas, you can have 20-minute Swell sound treatment where you are transported to a, you know, geographical location. You know, you then have a very deep and relaxing kind of sound experience, but you're also feeling that sound, and in particular the bass elements of the sound through your body, and that's almost like a massage, as I say, and that's been really powerful and effective and stuff. So I think that's a really interesting place for us to explore as well, and getting really good results.
So it looks like you're providing at the end here that there will be channels of different variations of distribution here, where you've got different therapies. Would there be are you looking at creating an app that these sounds or a library will be available to the public as well? And is this going to be, or is it just purely for people, you know, somatic therapists, sound therapists, all sorts of therapy? You know, will they have some kind of like subscription to the sounds, and they could use with their patients and their clients, you know? Yeah,
the focus initially is certainly going to be in this business to business world. So that's working with, as you said, therapists, you know, giving them tools to deliver a more enriching kind of sound and sonic experience for their customers, depending on what they're trying to deliver. Also businesses, I mentioned a few, you know, the hotel spa world or whatever, which is like just criminally kind of lacking in good music, essentially in the spa environment. You know, it's very stuck in that kind of like new age whale kind of like sounds of the 80s or Café de More chill and stuff, and very generic. So I think there's room there where it can be really like a positive for them in terms of an experience, if it's delivered right and you know, in tune with the types of treatments that they're delivering and types of experiences that they're delivering as well. So there's that sort of business road. I mean, that's something that I think is like my sort of safe space, because I've, you know, through my other business, which is a company called Open Ear, you know, I've been used to delivering, you know, essentially background music playlists to businesses, hospitality, leisure, retail for the last like 16 years it's been going. So that is a space that I know well, and yeah, I think there's if we're going to go and have an app on the App Store and allow that to be available to the public, that would be great. But that's quite a big undertaking. So we're going to see how this first phase goes, and then if everything goes well, then yeah, absolutely, we'll be looking at that.
Look, I love the whole ethos of this, and I think when we're definitely entering a space now in the music industry where there's more conscious businesses and more. And I love the neuroscience aspect of this, because I think, and you know, I think over the years, you know, electronic music and dance music culture has had, you know, the stigma of you know, hedonism and just, which, you know, I think is always going to be there, of a way to express oneself and let go and experiment and all these kind of I think that's been there since the beginning of time, as you mentioned before. I feel though what especially now after the pandemic, but I think with what's I think super important is for creatives and music entrepreneurs is to kind of break the stigma and dismantle, I guess, those old paradigms of that entering into a space of neuroscience and applying, trauma-informed methods and practices into your work is actually more acceptable and something that's not, just self-improvement. Like these things are kind of like, been tabooed or kind of like not so cool because, you've got to be, entering in this space, then kind of does it take you away from being creative? And I think it's quite the opposite. And I think this is the new kind of phase that we're in. At least that's what I believe. Would you share a bit more on that? Do you think that this is kind of where the music industry is going?
It's interesting when you say music industry because always the bad guy in the room is like this kind of rampant commercialization, so that when the money kind of people kind of get their mitts onto something, then you can almost lose the essence of what it is. So this whole kind of clubbing paradigm, like that has come through from the 80s and 90s or whatever, that you and I probably know very well. Certainly for me, like my period was like late 90s and that period of discovery, but it's a very different world. I mean, as I mentioned, like from the outset, that was kind of, to me, that was counterculture. That was like the underground, that was pushing against, what was the mainstream, which was where, the music industry happened and commercialization kind of happened of that. But now what we see is that it's crept in to dance music culture, and you see that it's almost taken over with even like these big festivals and like, brands getting involved and all that. And not all of that is bad. And, don't get me wrong, I've been involved with a bunch of that stuff as well. But it's a very different sort of scenario than, these kind of subcultures still exist, but it's maybe a little more difficult to find. And there's certainly a blurring of the lines in terms of like when you're an underground artist and, when you're a more mainstream or overground artist or whatever. So I think like that is the elephant in the room. And I think that applies itself to this whole kind of space of health and well-being as well. You have a lot of kind of like pseudoscience going around there. You have a lot of kind of like, kind of people trying to monetize like health and well-being. And I think like, there's something to be said around the use of music just intrinsically that we all kind of probably understand to greater or lesser degrees, which is this ability to, as a therapy, and as a way to self-soothe. And as you mentioned, like going clubbing for a lot of people is that. It's hedonism, but it's also just like escapism, and it's a type of therapy just in itself, So you don't want to lose track of that by, telling people that, well, actually this is, here's the health side of it and here's all the benefits of that. Here's the neuroscience and here's what it's doing, because you kind of like lose the kind of innocence a little bit. But obviously, if that can help some people, and I know that today's, maybe young people of today and the culture that we live in, like would maybe really welcome that side of things to really understand and dig deeper than maybe what we would have done back in the 90s or something. So yeah, there's got to be a balance as ever. And I agree with your fundamental point. I think like the opening up and the research and the way that I guess in general, just health and well-being is much more on the kind of agenda is not as uncool as what it was previously. It means that people can like start to really kind of make the most of the benefits of these kind of just going out and listening to music and then getting involved with these different tools, such as what we're trying to do with Swell, to really make music part of your life at a deeper kind of level than just as a form of entertainment.
And I take it like I take it that this has been also part of your own exploration and applying these tools and techniques and practices into your career. And that's why I mentioned at the start, I I'm wondering if that's been a big part of your way of being able to wear all these hats, is because you've been able to apply such sort of methods into creating space and health and well-being, self-care. You know, or is it just something that kind of happened naturally? Like, tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, I'm probably not. Look, for a long time, I DJ'd like pretty much every weekend, and I partied a lot with the best of them. I mean, I'm from Glasgow, and that just sort of, it comes in the water. Like that we like to party, and we can do it pretty well. So I had this experience, when I started to tour as a DJ, going out and partying a lot. I always had this balance in my life because I was always running I was never just solely a DJ / music producer, and that was my life. So there was always an end point for me where I was like, right, I've got to think about like what's happening in the week because I've got all these other responsibilities. And so I was able to balance that, and that was tough at various times. I remember like actually DJing in Australia on my first tour there, and obviously with the time difference in the UK, I was about to go on and play in a venue in Sydney midnight or whatever there, and I was getting calls to do with my other business, tech support, I've forgotten my password from the UK, and I was having to answer those kind of things. I was like, this is definitely not good for my mental health. That deal with that and then go and DJ and have this balance. So I think over time, and I guess just pre-pandemic, actually, I was thinking to myself, right, I really need to take a break from this. And my plan was to take 6 months, go and do the sound therapy course, and then see kind of what happened. And then the pandemic came along, and I was like, oh great. Like at first I was like, oh, this is my opportunity to actually stop sort of the mad touring and everything, and for a time, and dig into sound therapy, and it really kind of like rebalanced my life. And then it was kind of forced upon me, and that was a positive for me. I realized that probably not getting enough sleep, and I wasn't spending enough time on sort of self-care, if you like. So that was, for the first period of the pandemic, it was positive. Then it just dragged on and on, as we all know, and it was less good. But whatever, that first period was really a positive thing for me, on a very personal level. I know it was obviously difficult for many people, so I don't want to dismiss that. But for me, that shift of moving into sort of creating more sustainable habits and that are going to help you sort of be more responsible and achieve the things that you want. And you're building this business that has obviously been very successful for you over the last 16 years. And now this new venture, I guess that's part of, like, you wouldn't have been able to really kind of do that unless you did sharpen the habits and that sword, so to speak, and you're also a father now, you're a dad, so it's like, these are things that I guess comes with age, but I feel like I wish I had learnt more of these things earlier on in my career, and not that I regret the endless nights and the mornings as much, but I feel like if I had started putting certain practices that I use today and certain guidelines and habits that I have today, I feel like I may have done more positive stuff in my past, I guess. And I feel like, and I think, like you said before too, that this new generation seems to be a lot more welcoming and more open to applying this sort of ideas and methods in their music careers as well. And I think this is a really important time for the electronic music industry, because I think I feel that people can, everybody deserves to achieve
their dreams and their music dreams, it's just a $7 billion industry now. So there's a lot of work that if you know how to apply it to yourself as an individual, because it is a very DIY business and a bit industry. And so I think the aspiring music entrepreneur and creative should use these methods and these sort of ideas in their work and a day-to-day. I think it's imperative.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a few things that I've learned along the way, I guess. But one, I'm just one of these people to say yes to everything, and maybe that's not necessarily a good thing, but I think that the general sentiment is a good thing, which is to say, like, there's opportunities that will arise, and then a lot of serendipity that kind of arises from those opportunities, once you start to get involved with them, even if they seem, a little bit tangential or whatever. So I've benefited from that. Sometimes that feels like you're taking the long way around, but, that's been a positive thing for me. I think also, as you've said before, like wearing all these different hats and then getting experience within that, and how different things work and making connections through those different experiences. That's been really important, because ultimately any industry, and in particular the music industry, is about connections, and it's about it's obviously such a cliche, but it's like who you know and things like that. But you might know someone, you might meet someone along the way that then 2 years later can help you out and get your leg up somewhere else and stuff, and that's how this works. So getting out there and getting involved, is super crucial. Obviously, being mindful of your kind of mental health and what that's doing. I mean, I think I just read this, the Matthew Walker Why We Sleep book, and I was thinking, Jesus, I've been sort of slowly killing myself with lack of sleep over because it's just, I mean, he's like a damning kind of like insight into like, oh my God, like every time we have lack of sleep, which is just, it comes with the territory as a DJ and as a touring musician, you just don't get much sleep. I mean, even if you went to bed straight after you finished your set, you still wouldn't get, you just couldn't do it. So yeah, you are affecting your health fundamentally, and you have to take that and find ways to sort of balance that out, because there will be a payoff, like, later in life or at some stage and stuff. So you have to be mindful of that. And I think, like, certainly if I'd read that book a few years ago, maybe I've made a few different decisions. But here we are, and yeah.
yeah. We've certainly come out through the other side, and I guess we can now, because I find it, like, even through this podcast and being able to interview people such as yourself that can share these kind of insights, and I think that's also, I think, brings a lot of value to the industry and to the world, and I think that can help shape new positive changes, and in some way, hopefully, where our conversation today inspires someone to make certain changes.
One of the other things I was going to say just on this point, and again, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's something that I've really kind of, I think it took me a long time to understand. There's just a separation point for me in terms of, like, there's the music industry, and that can be just anything about how you monetize your own creativity, right? And that's everything through your social media, through, your record sales, your DJ gigs and all that sort of stuff, anything that brings in money. But then there's also the creative process where you're in the studio and you're making tunes, or you're DJing, or you're playing live and you're connected with an audience and you're in that moment. And, one of the reasons, I guess I've always known this kind of, like, maybe without knowing it, but, I picked the name Auntie Flo, Flo being the kind of the thing here, where being in that state of flow, which is, being, in that moment, this optimal experience, this level where, as a human being, you are completely kind of like locked in to that specific moment, and everything from, time dissolving and your ego kind of being destroyed in that moment, and just being, just existing like there. That's the key thing, and you can achieve that through, when you're in the studio or music production, you can achieve that through connecting with an audience and various different ways. But that sort of moment of flow where you're not thinking about, what's coming up next. You're not thinking about what's happened in the past, but you're just performing at that kind of optimum level. That's what it is, right? That's what the beauty of music is. That's the high point, the highest point I believe you'll ever get. Like, you might sell millions of records, but you won't achieve that same feeling as when you made that song or that record, and you had that creative idea, and that was just like in the moment that you did that. That's the highest point. So for me, that's like, to understand those two fundamental like differences, where like, yeah, you can do all the record sales or whatever, but whatever, that just leads you to the next thing that you want to then achieve. It's like you ticked off that goal, so you have another goal to achieve, right? Whatever, that's human nature. That's not necessarily going to bring you happiness. That's going to bring you another layer of stress. It might bring you momentary happiness because you've achieved that, but then you're straight away, human nature dictates that you're on to the next thing. But being in that state of flow where your creative self has done something like for yourself or connecting with an audience, that's the kind of like the power that's what we're all striving to achieve, and to remember that is kind of like key, because that will be then a memory that's formed that then you can recall in some way, shape or form in the future, and that's a glorious thing. And I then I was like, when the penny dropped to that, and it took me, as I said, a long time to realize that a lot of the pressure that I was putting on myself, to do that extra bloody Instagram post or whatever, and to, I don't know, whatever, like just go and, sell my wares in whichever way, shape or fashion, because I felt that's what I needed to do, that just dissolved a lot, and just, the pressure was lifted.
Yeah, no, I love how you brought this up, because I think if we get caught in that cycle of just this constant, we aspire to bring out and create things for the world, but if we're just constantly identifying ourselves with our accomplishments and the goals, it's a vicious cycle, and we're just constantly trying to get this happiness where if we finding happiness in just what we do every day, and that's really the where happiness really lives, and then all that's just added like garnish to everything else, and it's great to highlight that, because I think for someone who's trying to sort of understand, to dismantle or dissect where they put their intentions, and I think that's super important. I guess I also wanted to talk to you about your new platform, sort of another little creative outlet that you've got, which is Ambient Flo. Was that something that sort of spawned off because Worldwide FM disappeared, or like what? Tell me a bit about that, and how frequently are you updating the content for that?
Yeah, Ambient Flo was a kind of a little lockdown project. I did a few DJ set live streams in my garden. I mean, if you remember that, well, in the UK for sure, there was really nice weather that first part of lockdown. So I set up some turntables in my garden, and Saturday morning I did a sort of 2-hour live stream on like Instagram Live, Facebook Live, etc. And it was great, and it was just a really good thing to connect with other people and play this type of music. And if you remember back at that time, like a lot of DJs were just doing these kind of like club set, like live streams. And for me, I was like, I can't do that, because I've always struggled to do recorded mixes when there's no audience, right? And that I couldn't get my head around like just doing these kind of like club sets, not in a club, without an audience there live. So I was like, right, but what I can do is I can play a lot of like really kind of nice ambient music that I collect a lot of, and do that in my garden. And it just got a really good response. And one of the things that was really picked up on, especially in the Instagram Live, because it was literally just from my phone it was filming, was the sounds of nature. Like it was spring in the UK, so there was, the birds were singing, they were full voice. There was obviously a lack of like just ambient noise, plane noise, etc., city noise and stuff. So it was this combination of like the ambient music and the sounds of nature that I think really connected with people. And I realized that a lot of people in that early part of lockdown, or throughout lockdown, didn't really have that access to nature. So even just the power of listening to nature through this stream was a powerful thing for them and a point of connection to their stuff. So that was kind of cool. And I did, I did half a dozen of them, and then I decided to turn it into a 24-hour radio station, which is essentially playlist driven. So that exists and continues to exist now. It's ambientflow.com. And the way that it works is there's around about 300 tracks that are playlisted every month. There's 4 playlists. There's like a morning playlist, a daytime playlist, and a nighttime playlist, and they're all I select different music that suits those kind of times of day. Matches to our sort of circadian rhythms that are the sort of mood and emotion of that time point. So for example, daytime is a bit more rhythm based, and nighttime is it's kind of deeper and more kind of like sleepy kind of sounds, and morning is very kind of like invigorating, but yeah, also kind of relaxing, etc. You can imagine. And then I work with a guest curator every month, who's just someone that I've met in my network, or I just reach out to, that is just suits the kind of like that style of music and stuff. So yeah, we're kind of into year 2 and almost coming up to year 3 with Ambient Flo. So I've worked with a ton of great curators. I mean, people just pop out the woodwork. Cold Cut got in touch, was the big heroes of mine. I've had the likes of James Holden, like
Wow.
Nicola Cruz. I mean, this year we've had Grand River. Currently we've got this Ninja Tune signing, United Freedom Collective. So yeah, it's been a great like just little side project, I guess. We have a Patreon page that was an experiment, and at the time I was really interested in like new models for the music industry and see how they can be like fairer remuneration, because I as based in the UK, we can acquire radio licenses for like a small internet home radio, and they cost like 200 sort of dollars a year, sorry. So it's not very much, and guaranteed that money isn't going back to the artist that I'm playing, and even if it did, it would be pennies. So one of the things I wanted to do was set up we came up with this concept of an artist profit share, and the idea was, based on the money that the station can make, was to share a percentage of the profits to across this a smaller community of artists that were playlisting. And I think the principles of that worked, and since then there's been a few different models that are quite similar. Like there's A Slice, which I think is really interesting, and I think they've done a great job with that in terms of DJs like feeding in their playlists and track lists after their sets and stuff. So with Ambient Flo, I mean, it's whilst we did build up a decent enough audience, we never got it to the point where it was really making any profit. So whilst the principles of the idea, I think, were sound, like the actual reality was that it's never been able to generate enough of a income stream that would then even cover our costs, to be honest, like let alone like kind of pay a profit to the artist. So it was an unfortunate side of things, but it seems to be giving a lot of people some pleasure and access to this music, and obviously a showcase to some music that they might not have discovered before. So that's powerful enough, and I'm very happy to keep doing it, even just for my listening. I put that on in the morning most of the time, in the daytime, and have it on, and it's just great to work from home, wherever your job is, or just for, to escape or whatever. It's music that I really like, and the idea is to try and be a cut above all the kind of like very generic kind of chill out playlists on Spotify or whatever. So you can listen for free for anyone listening to this, like ambientflow.com, and you can support it at patreon.com/ambientflow. It's my little plug.
Amazing. No, I think I look like this new era that we're in. We're all kind of learning new ways to create income streams and create new business models around the technology that's available to us. And I think something like this could work. Work in a system for you at some point. I hope it does. It sounds amazing. It sounds like you're and like when I first met you in Dubai. I kind of felt like, we DJ'd at a party, at an event together. It was a corporate event that the 264 guys at the time put together. And I had not really come across your music or knew much about you. And I really enjoyed listening to your DJ sets, and I could tell this sort of intricate and the nuances and this attention to detail. And clearly, this is just the touch of the iceberg on all this great work that you're doing. And I thank you so much for joining me today and sharing more about who you are and the projects that you're working on. It's just been awesome. Aside from ambientflow.com, where else can people find more about you and Swell and Open Ear? Where can they learn more about you?
Yeah, so just online, I guess. We've got the Swell website is swellstudio.io. The Open Ear website is openearmusic.com. My personal website, because I do a lot of weird sort of sound art and different like other noodling things in music, is just briandesouza.in. And yeah, we're on all the social sort of platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and the like and stuff. So please follow us and say hello if you're interested in what we do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. Thanks for joining Electronic Music Live today. And looking forward to learning more about what you've got ahead, and all the best with Swell. I think it's an amazing project. Thank you so much.
Thank you.